Committee meeting. It's September 4th. Sorry, Karen, I should have warned you I was going to start, and I'll get that right.
I can do it really quick.
Ah.
I'm getting real good at it.
Thank you. All right, so let's start with introductions, starting with DCBS staff or DFR staff. Obviously, I'm Ethan Baldwin. Karen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Karen Winkle, the rules coordinator for the division on the policy team.
I can go next. I'm Jesse O'Brien. I'm the policy manager for the division, and unfortunately, I have to drop off at 2, but wanted to be here for the first part.
And I think we're expecting Tasha Sizemore, but she's not on yet. So when she joins us, we'll do that. Let's go ahead and go with members of the RAC, please.
Okay, I'll go first. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Antoinette Uwachi, and I'm the Senior Public and Regulatory Affairs Specialist for Cambia Health. We govern the plans of Regents Blue Cross Blue Shield of Oregon and also the Brisbane health plans. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tara Harrison. I'm the Government Affairs Director for Providence Health Plan. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Hi, I'm Angela Donnelly. I'm the State Policy Director for Oregon Consumer Justice.
I am Rick Blackwell, the Director of Government Relations in Oregon for Pacific Source.
Hi, David Liebert, Senior Director of Actuarial for Kaiser.
Hi, Alex Vanos, Manager of Actuarial at MODA, responsible for our ACA rate filings here.
Hi, I'm Lisa Mudgett. I am Assistant Director of Actuarial for Regents and Bridgespan.
And I should say Lisa is with me, and she is attending as an interested party. I'm the RAC member.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Do we have anyone else who has not introduced themselves?
Robin Ear with Ear Water Resources, small business owner.
And then I see Tasha, you have joined as well.
I just did, yes. Excellent. Would you like me to introduce myself?
Sure. Yeah, I think everyone knows you, but.
Hi, everybody. Tasha Sizemore, Life and Health Product Regulation Manager with the division.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for the introduction. I'll do a quick recap of our last meeting. At the last meeting, we discussed a tentative list of items that DFR staff had compiled based on feedback we'd received from stakeholders in the past, as well as our own internal discussions. That is attached here as the attachment with the agenda. We also discussed an example from Washington State of a document that they had put out that was template-based that kind of did a similar function to what we're looking at here, and had a discussion about template versus rule text and kind of the merits of both of those approaches. So we'll go ahead and jump into just a discussion of the list as it stands now. And anyone have any comments before I proceed about the last meeting or any recap? I know, Rob, you weren't at that one, but I believe you were able to go back and watch the recording.
Yeah, I was, well, actually I wasn't able to watch the recording, but I did submit comments before the meeting, and they don't seem to be reflected in these notes, which is fine.
We did discuss sorry you haven't had a chance to see the recording, but we did discuss your comments in our first meeting. If you have a chance to go back and take a look.
Okay.
That might
I'll
be
try
helpful.
to do that.
So just to recap the list, obviously company name, website URL, so where to find the company. We had customer service contact details. I put in phone number because I'm assuming if we already have the website URL, then a phone number would be the next logical piece of information we'd need. The requested percentage rate change, the requested rate change effective date, the plans that are impacted, the people impacted, an illustrated or visual form of the service area that for the rate, a breakdown of the rate request broken down by those examples or those pieces, a breakdown of retained premium and MLR for the last 3 years. After discussion with the RAC at the last meeting, we have gone ahead and removed the item for how to access information in other languages. There was some concern about the administrative workload, and we heard that. So at this time, we went ahead and removed that. The next item was executive compensation. This is one where we here at DFR, we hear a lot about this item from various stakeholders about the impact of executive compensation on rates. So there's some discussion about that. Yeah, Rick, go ahead.
Before we get to executive compensation, can we go up to, I don't recall, Ethan, did we talk about how we explain what MLR is to people? It's a concept that it took me years to understand when I was even in this world. I feel like that's something that I think people need to understand, that medical loss ratio is how much we spend on healthcare, with the rest being for other kinds of costs like admin and the like.
We did, that was discussed as to, what MLR was. I'm all for any suggestions as to how to have that submitted in the rule or through this. But we can come back to that because I did also want to talk about the idea of rule text versus template again, and that might be better to come back to that there once we've broken some more ground. So please hold on to that one for me. So then with executive compensation, what I attached here is an example of what we used to post in our rate review decision documents in the past. We haven't created those documents for a few years, but in the past we used to put these in those documents. And it essentially is taken from information given to our financial regulation unit and kind of shows a very high level of what executive compensation actually impacts on rates. So did anyone have any thoughts? This was just kind of we were hoping maybe like a starting point for a compromise that would get something about executive compensation without getting into specific names and salaries and things like that. So anyone have any thoughts on that one? Antoinette, go ahead.
Yeah, so I am discussing the added provision in there, although our preference would have been to remove the entire executive compensation for the reasons we provided in our comment letter. But with this example here, if you were to move forward with, for example, the second sentence, which will reflect the percentage of premiums, like if we are filing rates for 2027, then what year are you looking at with respect to the salaries?
That's a great question. So in this case, I think these were pulled from 2018 or 27. I'd have to go back and look. That's something we could clarify here as to if you wanted to use the previous year or the year of the rates you're filing. Sometimes it's easier to do the previous year because you have complete data versus, projecting. So that might be something that, we can discuss.
And then one last question I have is the DFR going to actually provide not so much examples, but who they will categorize as senior executives, because that's very broad.
Yeah, let me go back and take a look at there was a document that this was submitted with, and I should have had it up. I talked to our financial regulation unit about it.
While Ethan's pulling that up, I just wanted to make what might be a somewhat obvious point, which is that I don't think we would include the first sentence of this here about consumers expressing concern, because this isn't a document that's about kind of calling out what people may or may not be concerned about. It's just providing information about the context of the rate request that would be helpful for consumers. That specific verbiage is from the decision documents that we used to provide. And the reason we put it that way was because we included that language because of how frequently we were receiving consumer comments about that specific issue.
Yes, thank you, Jesse. So Antoinette, to answer your question, the information is pulled from the executive compensation schedule that the companies submit to our financial regulation unit.
Thank you.
So that wouldn't be something that I would envision DFR creating or giving to carriers. That would be something that from your own executive compensation schedules you could provide if we were to go forward with this. But yeah, to Jesse's point, we would definitely remove that first sentence. Yeah, Tara, I saw your hand.
I want to reiterate the concerns that I raised in the last meeting. With this, generally, I think it's a distraction from the more meaningful conversation around MLR, and this is kind of, anyway, it's a distraction. It doesn't really highlight what we're doing with premiums for healthcare and administrative expenses. And we have resources from reserves and investments and other places beyond premium where compensation can stem from. So it's tricky to kind of formulate it like this. And then I struggle with what formula are we using to determine average premium, because if we're just looking at individual market and small group where we're submitting rates, even then there's some big discrepancies. And are we looking at premium from what the consumer pays out of pocket? How are we factoring in tax credits within that? There's some complicating factors, right? And I don't know, I'd love to see behind the scenes what you're seeing that formula looking like. It's easier, when we're doing, if I look back at fiscal analysis and how we run that in the legislative session, we might do it for a particular ASO group. And it's a lot easier to say, what is a PMPM cost for that group? But if we're looking at it in this broader way like this, where it's just this kind of quick headline that you're pulling out and the details really matter, we're not looking through the details and providing that information. And then if we are digging into the details and providing all of that, we're putting a lot of focus on something that is not what we should be highlighting here, which is what percentage of your healthcare dollar is going to receiving healthcare. And that's the opposite side of the same coin, but it's a more meaningful conversation to be having.
Sure. Thank you for the comment. I didn't see whose hand was next, but I'll go ahead and go with you, Rob, and then Rick after that.
again, my apologies since I haven't had a chance to review the video from the last time, but as someone who uses health plans and have to decide on them for my employees, I don't care about executive compensation. I don't need this to be on an annual report that's consumer friendly. Personally, I don't see the value. What I want to know is, what are the changes in the plans? Why did the rates go up? How do we keep the rates down? How does the network change compared to previous years? How are my benefits different than someone at a large corporation or a medium-sized corporation who has options that I don't have as a small business owner? That's what I want to know. I want to know, like, some of the other lists on the bullet lists are fine, but I want to know why the cost went up and what am I losing? Like, what's changing in my health plan from year to year? So I don't see how executive compensation helps me.
Okay. Rick.
I mean, I think sorry to beat this dead horse, but yeah, we also don't really see a need for compensation. So first, like, I don't think this was discussed during session. I think that would have changed our mind about this bill had we known this was part of the plan. Having said that, though, don't necessarily think that compensation alone is really helpful to understand the costs of running a plan. Take for instance, our CEO is working on across 3 different states. Um, that doesn't necessarily figure into how much administrative expenses are necessary to keep up with all the mandates and the administrative requirements and everything else that we have here in Oregon. The better seems like the better place to be without causing, without the inflammatory sort of how much is my CEO making, is how much admin expenses, or in other words, how much does it cost for the plan to run in this state, impact premiums, if you really want to get at that. And then I mean, it just feels like this is an opportunity to get past the kind of question that seems intuitive if you don't know much about insurance, but is really a lot more complicated, and to help educate the general public that there's more to it than just how much someone at the top makes. So, well, that's my 3 cents.
Yeah, definitely appreciate it. All right, so got some good feedback on exec compensation. We'll take that back, but definitely here. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say Alex Vanos, I think, has his hand up as well.
Sorry, that Alex and then David. Sorry, missed your hands.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with everybody else that spoke before me, so I won't rehash that. I think if this were to be provided, I'm struggling a little bit with exactly how we would report that. So if it's the company in total, that's not gonna that looks a little different than what it is for individual or small group. And if it's those segments specific, then we get into the challenge of, okay, if you take total dollars, how much of that do you allocate to each segment? If that is what were to be reported, I think it would definitely be easiest to look backwards and base it on that last completed year rather than try to project that 2 years out into the future.
Thank you. David and then Angela.
Yeah, I think it's already been said numerous times. Tara, Rich said it pretty well that executive compensation it's a small piece of the story, and I think if we really trying to get at this, that we already report on admin in our rate filings, and I think cleaning that up to present publicly would be a better way to go. I mean, it is a rather technical document what's already in the rate filings, but I mean, there's executive compensation is so picky, and then it's if you're really trying to get at that, then you're looking at such a small piece of the expense pie, and there, I mean, it's not just executives um at the carriers, it's at providers, it's at hospitals. It's kind of picking on one thing when there's a much bigger admin story to tell.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Angela.
Yeah, you kind of answered my question is this information somewhere else that consumers could easily access? Because I think that it is important for them to know kind of where the money that they're paying into is going in some form, and being able to access that easily if they have that question should be available.
Jesse.
Yeah, so this is partly an answer to that and partly an answer to some other things, but this information is available in the financial disclosures that companies make to us, but it is not something that is publicly posted anywhere. It's a public record that would have to be requested, or at least that's my understanding. But it is available. And then I just wanted to reiterate what I said last time around about the origin of this idea, which was, I think everything that everyone has said here is quite accurate in as much as this is not something that we believe is a big contributor to premium increases, and in fact not something that would necessarily even be that helpful to an individual consumer in engaging with rate review. But having years ago experience with a equilibrium where we were getting a much larger number of consumers engaged in the rate review process, which we are actually trying to get back to with this. This issue was pretty much the number one topic we got comments on from consumers. And often the tone of the comment was something like, "Why aren't you looking at executive compensation?" And so I think the thought was to clarify that, in fact, that is part of the overall puzzle, but it's a tiny part of the overall puzzle, and to make that information available to consumers so that we kind of clarify the context here. But I do certainly agree that it is not the be all and end all of the rate review process by any stretch of the imagination.
All right. Well, I think we have officially beat that horse, that dead horse. So we can move on to oh, Rick, I see we're back. Let's go.
No, sorry, I don't think we're done yet. Jesse, I just want to understand, like, is DFR going to keep this in or not? Because that might change how we approach this.
Yeah.
I think we need to take this feedback back and discuss it further. Nothing is final until the rule is actually proposed. I mean, and even then, obviously, we would take comments and whatnot.
All right. Anyone have anything else related to the executive compensation piece?
I do. I'm not raising my hand. Sorry. So to continue on with Rick's question, the next version of the draft rules that come out, am I on the right path to think that is the DFR's decision, which will lead to formally proposing it, and then a hearing, et cetera, et cetera?
Well,
is that what I should conclude?
No, let me go ahead and jump in, Antoinette. This is our second meeting. We anticipate having our third one later in September.
Mhm.
At that point, I would like to obviously be much further along than just a list, having rule text
Mhm.
written to then discuss with the group would be my goal. And again, that would just be another meeting. That would just be draft text. That would not be proposed text. That would not be anything like that. So there's still, after this meeting, opportunity to submit written comments. Then there'll be another meeting where we can discuss where we're at. And then again, more opportunity for comments before we get to the proposed rule. I will note that based on our pretty strict timeline, that will hopefully be our last meeting and likely need to be our last meeting to make sure we get the rule filed in time. So if people do have comments between now and that next one, I would really appreciate if they're comments that maybe suggest resolutions as opposed to just identify some concerns, just so that we can get to a place where all of us are having a productive final meeting. And that would be great. Yeah, Antoinette.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure you answered my question. So there will be a third rack meeting. Got it. But before that third rack meeting, I'm assuming another version will come out with more of it looking like a draft rule rather than these data elements. So my question is that when that other version comes out prior to our rack meeting, hopefully it does come out prior to our third rack meeting, is it going to be reflective of the DFR's position with respect to executive compensation? So if we see it in there, in my mind, I'm thinking that the DFR took back our feedback today, discussed it, and decided to leave it in still for now. Maybe there may be some revisions to the language that would accompany that, for example, removing the first sentence, maybe modifying the second one to reflect, the previous full financial year or something like that. I don't know. So when we receive that second version for the third rack meeting, if we see executive compensation in there, does that mean that the DFR has discussed it and is reflective of their position at this time?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment that, what's going to be in there, but yeah, anything that we send to you at that point, we'll have taken any comments we've received both at the meeting and offline and be a version, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's even a strong position or anything like that. It's just another discussion item, putting it into a more formal, I guess, format. So it may not even be, it's still going to be open for discussion like every item, just like in the first meeting, how the feedback for accessing information in other languages was not in support of it. So that was removed, but it's still on this list just in case someone wanted to discuss it, so that we're still working through the process. So, this is still, we're still not close to the finish line where anything's going to be proposed or going out. So you'll have plenty of opportunities, and we are taking all this feedback and we'll discuss internally. David, I saw your hand.
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out exactly what was going on here. We've got a third meeting scheduled, but you were saying that it sounded like you're saying that we got to wrap it up with the third one, but we have a long ways to go. I mean, at some point, will we get the opportunity to give final blessing on a template or on a model letter? I mean, is that expected to happen before the third meeting? It sounds like not, but
No. My expectation would be we'll take the feedback from today's meeting, which we still have time today to discuss. We're going to talk internally. We'll receive any feedback, offline, any comments, but our next meeting is not until, I want to say, September 25th or somewhere around there. So I would expect, and as you'll see on the next item on our agenda is the discussion of rule text versus template. But we should have something to you guys in advance of that meeting that takes the comments we've received, the feedback we've received at the first meeting and this meeting, and it'll be something that we can discuss there. And hopefully that'll be a meeting where we can come to a pretty, we'll have an actual rule to discuss versus just a list, and then we'll go from there. So I guess I shouldn't have said it's not that we're not close. It's just that we still have plenty of opportunities for feedback between now and when this will be finished. All right. So are we ready to move on to changes in networks? And Tasha, I'll let you kind of speak on what you envision here, because I know that this was an item that everyone at the last rack seemed generally in support of. And I know, Rob, you mentioned that that's something that's important to you. But getting to what actually is reported in this document was a bit of a challenge. So, do people have ideas? Have they thought about what specifically would go into changes to networks, what that would look like, what kind of language in a rule we would need to clearly articulate what we're looking for?
And Ethan, I'll just add that in many ways, this is not like every doctor or facility that would be changing from one year to another. This would be kind of a capture of major hospital changes. If one pharmacy chain is no longer in network, that would be something that we would want to capture or have insurers capture on this. But not, independent Doc Holiday down on Main Street. That's not necessarily the intent of this. So I just wanted to clarify that that's what I am thinking of this as, but I'd love to hear from the committee about where your thoughts are on this. And especially, Rob, you have, I think, some pretty significant ideas in this area. So,
yeah, why don't you go ahead, Rob?
Well, I mean, I can't repeat everything I had in the email that I sent to you folks months ago, but mostly because I can't remember off the top of my head, but what I forwarded to you folks was this idea that I think it's important for us consumers to understand that if I'm under the ACA, let's say Blue Cross and Blue Shield, ACA plan, and I have a certain size network of so many doctors, or I don't know the best way to measure it, but the idea is to say, if I have access to so many doctors or such and such network, I know for a fact that that network is not the same when you switch from the ACA to a small business to a large business plan. And so understanding that if I'm signing up for a small business plan and my network of doctors and dentists or mental health practitioners change from 10,000 to 999, it's good to know that. If I went from a small business plan to a large business plan someday in the future, or a medium scale business, how does my network change? Or if my network has changed from year to year simply because of cost or negotiations with providers, I'd like to know that too. I've been screwed over so many times by people thinking I'm in network, and I'm thinking I'm in network, and the person at the receptionist desk tells me I'm in network, and then I show up for my appointment and I'm not in network. And so knowing how the networks change is important, because that is part of the value that an insurance plan brings to you. Not just looking up your own doctors, because you never know when you might need a new doctor. So understanding that, I did a search a few years ago when I was on the ACA plan for mental health therapists for our son who could prescribe medication, and I found 3 in the Portland metro area that were in network out of a list of 50 that they were accepting patients and they were in network. So I think understanding how the networks change from year to year and plan to plan is super important. I'll leave it at that. I know I had other comments, but I'll stop there.
Yes, thank you. Antoinette.
Yeah, so I wanted to build up on what Tasha said, or follow up with what Tasha said. So I just want to understand. So I think hopefully you're still leaning towards what you were looking for the changes to networks to reflect, which at the last meeting, I believe you mentioned that it would refer to anything that or any modification to the network that impact the rates or may move towards to doing like a modification or discontinuation filing. And I'm hoping that what has been said so far falls under that bucket, because I think that's what's more meaningful to the consumer.
So can you repeat that again in summary? What's more meaningful to the consumer?
Like those modifications to the network that impacts the rates. So for example, if we are discontinuing or we had, terminated a network that is factored into our rates that the consumers should know, then we will provide that information in here.
I would agree. I think that's important, but I think knowing that how many practitioners in some large categories is also important. Knowing that if I want a mental health professional who can prescribe medication, psychiatric medication for our son, I'd like to know that from year to year, if that goes from 10 to 5 to 3 to 1, or it goes from 1 to 3 to 5 to 10. I'd like to know that from year to year. I think that's extremely valuable for my family and others that I know.
And I'll let the DFR maybe focus on that, but I think that's where we're getting more into network adequacy more than rate filing. So, but I'll leave it at that. Okay.
Well, I understand, but each year we pay more and more for health insurance, and that is what it is. But at the same time, you need to know what you're buying, right? And part of it is the network. Just like it is for prescription drugs, knowing what's dropped off, or hospitals or renegotiations or whatever it may be. But part of it is just understanding what are your choices for doctors?
And I totally understand where you're going, Rob. But again, I do want the DFR to comment on this, because I think what you're asking would apply regardless of the rate. And it's really more of a network adequacy issue, because also it's hard to know which providers are coming in and out, or meaning, have availability, not availability. So it changes throughout the month, throughout the year, so it's really hard to actually put a list or provide that information in the rate in the consumer friendly document. But I know others have their hands raised, and I'm sure they want to comment on that too. But I do get where you're going, Rob. I do understand.
Yeah, thank you both. Let's go David and then Tara.
Yeah, and I look at this as there's so many different ways to look at networks, that you can look at what impacts the rates. And I mean, I look at Kaiser myself. I work primarily on individual rate filings where we only have HMO products. It's real easy. If you see Kaiser on the side of the building, it's a network. But we do have on the small group products. We do have some more PPO like products, and I think having an explanation of what the differences are in networks is important. You can see 3 plans that look identical, but the prices are different, and why. Uh, Year to year, there's always changes. Actually, there's changes not just year to year. There's changes day to day in networks. Um, providers come and go. Providers quit or they join a company. And you can have, I mean, we file these rates, and I would assume this document in May for the following year, but big changes happen over the course of that, you know, not 20 months. I mean, like for small group plans, those plans go all the way out, not just for a year, but for almost 2 years. So it's really hard to have a real thorough listing of provider counts when those counts will change frequently and sometimes by a lot. But I think getting the big picture, like, what are there major changes to the hospitals that are in network? And I know it can really look different if you're a statewide carrier versus urban area such as Kaiser, because there's a lot more hospitals once you go statewide. But are there major clinics? Are there major hospitals that are moving in and out of networks? Are consumers comparing two plans that are different in price, but what they don't understand is that one of those networks has a third of the providers that the other network has. I think those are the important things to cover. We're not going to cover contracting. That's what really impacts rates. And again, it's really hard to keep that list day to day because, we can't. We just can't, because these filings are static once we submit them.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. Tara.
Thank you to Robert and Antoinette and David. I want to kind of join the conversation here, and Robert, first say, we're here. I'm here representing Providence Health Insurance, but speaking from a personal level, I've had your exact experience with trying to find a provider to prescribe psychiatric medication to a minor, and it's hard. It's an area where I don't think we have enough providers, and we have a system that kind of deals with things differently. And some primary care doctors or pediatricians do that, and then there's a situation where you have kids with more complex needs, and the provider pool for those needs is small. I live that myself, so I'll throw that out as kind of a personal comment that to say I understand. When I look at this within the context of rate setting, I understand where Antoinette's coming from with this is kind of a network adequacy issue, and how do we inform folks about what we're required to offer them in the context of network adequacy. And then there's a piece of what is our plan design, and how are folks understanding what a network looks like within the various plans that are available to them. And is this the right forum for that, or is there a better forum for that? How can we do better as carriers at making sure that people know the value of what they're purchasing when they purchase a health plan? If that's not clear, I welcome opportunities to figure out how to make it more clear, because I think that's something that the community should have available to them. And there's a degree to which, rates are affected by network, and we can talk about networks. And then there's that real challenge with rates are set once for a plan year, and they're kind of solid, and that's what these rate hearings and filings are about. And networks are in flux. Providers come in and out, provider capacity changes. We could hold a rate hearing and in it say we have X number of providers who are open to taking new patients in primary care. If we were to dig in and do all the research and have that information available, and that number could change significantly by the time folks are looking to enroll with a new primary care provider. Those are challenging dynamics of the industry, and I don't know how to solve them through the rate hearing, and I'm kind of opening that up as just a recognition of the problem and a willingness to engage on it, and an uncertainty if this is the right place for it, but I don't want to lose the importance of the issue that you raised. So I don't know. I don't know that I'm providing a lot of feedback as much as I'm just asking a lot of questions, but I wanted an opportunity to kind of share my thoughts too.
Yes, thank you, Tara. So it sounds like everyone is on. Oh, Rob, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say I appreciate the comments. I think if you simply put a date on it, as of this date of the renewal plan, this is how many people are in our network, I think that's fine. You shouldn't be obligated whether it changes in 1 hour or changes in 1 week by however much. But I mean, just knowing what are the big drivers of a change in cost from year to year is really important. I mean, I just think that, you know, what is it that the consumer uses? The consumer wants to know how much their prescription drugs cost. What's in tier 1 versus tier 5 for drugs, right? They want to know what are their deductibles, all those kind of things. And you can even chart them out into a table, which is what I have to do every year when I compare between health plans, because there's no summary table that compares all these plans that allows me to do it. I have to create it myself, which takes hours and hours and hours and is a pain in my royal derriere. But being able to concisely tell someone how our network compares to another provider for competitive purposes, I think can be really valuable. You know, we've also had lots of people who were in network on January 1st, and then by May 30th, they were no longer in network, and we had to change dentists or doctors because they were no longer in network. So I get it that it changes, but being able to know how big your network is and how it frequently it changes from year to year, I think is really important.
All right. So Rob, we've heard your suggestion for how network changes would look, and we've heard from our carrier representatives that they like the idea, but does anyone on the carrier side have an idea of what it might look like or how we could get to this in a way that would be fitting for a consumer-friendly document and would be easily explainable? Antoinette, go ahead.
Yeah, I was informed that we do provide a blurb along those lines in terms of like any system, any major system changes, network changes, and also, you know, describing our network. We have a blurb about that in our memo that accompanies the filing. So it may be a matter of just moving that information in this consumer-friendly document. But again, you know, it will be more around big network, you know, changes. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is that we provide that information, you know, the blurb about it in the memo itself, and it's something we can move in a consumer-friendly document. So
Okay.
so I think that would be, and this is more for Rob, that would be something meaningful to the consumer, right? Just to move it from the memo and put it in the consumer-friendly document. And these are like the major network changes that we know at that time of the filing.
You could even do it as something like a simple table that just says whether hospitals have been added or dropped, or whether, you know, your mental health practice is expanded, or you know, just broad categories. You obviously within mental health, there's probably 27 categories, right? It'd be crazy to include them all, but just giving a sense of someone's network and how that might change, a simple table would be awesome.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. You know, those major network changes definitely can be added here. But when we go into really, really, you know, detailed stuff, that may be a little bit out of scope for the rate filing or the consumer-friendly document. But definitely report on what we know for now at the time of filing. We can't predict that a network is going to change 6 months from now, but at the time of the filing, what we know could be reflected in the consumer-friendly document. At least for regions, we can move it from the blurb and put it in the consumer-friendly document.
All right, Alex, I see your hand.
Yeah, well, I guess just I think it would be we definitely want to speak to cost drivers and those major changes that impact rates. Everybody's commented on that. I think any additional information, I think it would be good to have a template, because I imagine that's gonna, how high level versus detailed to go is going to be a little subjective. And I think it's, I imagine it'd be the most consumer friendly if you've got a template that you can kind of compare carrier A to carrier B. Otherwise, I don't know how useful that info is going to be if, the way we're rolling it up or drilling down is different.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, Tasha, do you have any thoughts on the discussion here?
Not right now. I'm just kind of taking it all in. Definitely, I'm thinking that a template or some kind of really strong guidelines about what the document looks like is the way to go. And also reflecting on some of the concerns that I've heard in the past about how large of a list the network piece could be. So thinking about broad categories, hey, we have out of the, I don't know how many major hospital systems there are. I probably should know off the top of my head, but I'm not coming up with it right now. So out of the 5 major hospital systems, as a Acme Insurance, I have 4 of them or whatever. So thinking about those broad categories, but aside from that, I'm just kind of taking it all in. Thanks though, Ethan.
All right, so we'll move to, Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I keep dropping my hand. I was trying to figure out how to formulate this question. It seems to me that what we would file in a rate filing, if it was specific to network design, was anything that was materially impacting rates, right? Like most network changes I wouldn't think would materially impact rates, but say loss of a hospital in Central Oregon, not that that's happening, right? I'm just saying, but that could materially impact rates, and that would be something that could definitely be subject to the rate filing. I guess my question is what is now required in the rate filings that would be a material impact? Are we even required to give you, what information are we required to give you under the underlying rate filing that would need to be reflected in the consumer-friendly document?
So Rick, to answer your question, the actuaries give a lot of information that, to Rob's point, may be important for consumers, but maybe because it's buried in the actuarial memorandum, which is dry and boring, most consumers might not be necessarily aware of it. So if there are major changes to the network, like the hospital example is a good one, because that is something that not infrequently I see, major changes to pharmacies, and then also as biologics have expanded, I've seen insurers start to talk about how biologics or categories of biologics or biosimilars, changes in that are particularly impacting rates for the year. We heard about that a little bit with some of the biosimilars that came onto the market very recently, and we've seen some insurer changes to the formulary as a result. So anything, and that's really broad, but that's how broad it has to be, anything that is a it supports an insurer's position that their rates need to change. Whatever that anything might be would be included, right? So anything in the kitchen sink.
So can I ask a question? We keep saying rates. Rates. What happens if it doesn't affect rates? How would a consumer ever know?
So there are a lot of minor plan changes that may not have an impact on the underlying rates. You're very correct in that. The insurers for modification and discontinuations of plans are required annually to send out a notice to members about, they don't get into super fine detail in my experience, but they do talk about, hey, you know, there are some drugs that are now on the generic category, and we just want to let you know about that. So there would be some of that information relayed in the annual notice of change or modification and discontinuation notice. And then depending on how an insurer communicates with their members around the time of renewal, they a lot of insurers send out additional information about what is changing. That the outside of the modification and discontinuation notice, that insurers are required to send out. Anything beyond that does not have specific requirements. It's just things that the insurer specifically would like to call out that is changing. So
I'm sorry, but that was a very long and unsatisfying answer for me. I'm sorry. In my company renewal, my insurance provider dumped 300 pages on me in the mail for me to review, and I had to make heads or tails of it. But yet, when I actually went to the website and figured it out, I saw that some of my prescription drugs that my family uses went from tier 3 to tier 1, which is great. But I got no notice about that, no statement in the 300 pages that told me that change was occurring. So I'm happy, but you know, I go back to my point about, you know, therapists or practitioners who can prescribe medication, mental health practice practitioners who can prescribe medication for children. If the number of people in the Portland area goes from 10 to 2, and my provider, that may not be changing the rates at all, but it's super important to me and super important to every other family that needs those services. So if it's not going to be part of this rate because the rules have then made this super narrow and not consumer friendly at the end of the day, then where do consumers get this information? I mean, how can you expect me as an employer to compare between 45 different small business plans and make a judgment on what's the best for my employees when I have no comparison table or anything that makes it easy for me to understand, right?
Yeah, and I understand that frustration. I think what we're talking about here and what makes it really important for me to acknowledge that when we're talking about consumer-friendly information, it's very difficult for an insurer to make a consumer-friendly document that speaks to each individual enrollee. So everything that the insurer would put together would just be very broad, like, hey, we have 20 different medications that used to be brand only that now have a generic. Look at our formulary for more information. There's still going to be that level of research that a consumer is going to need to either do on their own or engage with a broker and producer on. But a consumer-facing document is still only going to be a very general document because there will be no way for a consumer or for an insurer to make that specific to each individual consumer. So I absolutely
I would never
hear you.
I would never suggest that it has to be specific to each consumer. So you took my comments to an extreme that was not intended. My point is that It's easier for me to shop for a car and compare between cars than it is health plans. That seems wrong to me. It's easier for me to buy a house than to figure out these health plans. That also seems wrong to me. It's easier for me to shop for auto insurance, home insurance, umbrella insurance, and even professional business liability insurance than it is for health insurance.
Yeah.
So I'm
Rob,
simply asking that what we produce, whether it's under the excuse of a rate review or the documents the insurance providers, is to make it consumer friendly so someone can actually compare between health plans within one provider and between plans between health providers.
thank you, Rob. I don't want to cut you off, but we are in a bit of a time crunch. We appreciate the comments on this one. I'm going to table that one for a second and go to the next item on our agenda. It says rule text. I meant for it to say rule text versus template, but I failed to do that. My mistake. But we have been working behind the scenes on trying to get a template together, and it is not going quite as well as we had hoped, just because of the compressed timeline and the other competing rulemakings and projects we have going on. So what are the RAC's thoughts on more an idea of rule text that's takes the list as a starting point and maybe is a little more detailed of what each one of those items is, and then the companies would submit their own document based on that versus and doing that as opposed to a template, which we may have a difficult time getting something out for review before our next meeting. David, go ahead.
Yeah, Ethan, I understand your issues with a template. That the more I think about it, the more I think it's a task that is fruitless. That you can never get a template that's going to fit everybody's needs. But I think definitely having something that you can line up, three different carriers' documents side by side, and be able to go down and say, okay, section 1 is, whatever it is. Just be able to say section 1 is the same thing on each of them. Section 2 is the same thing on each of them, and they're not going to be the same text or anything like that, but at least cover the same topics so that they can be lined up side by side and not have to go searching front to back on each of them to see where's the customer service number, for example.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I definitely understand having a subjects that need to be covered, the order to cover them in, but maybe produce a sample. And I know that I mean I would definitely volunteer to work with you guys on producing a sample if need be, but it doesn't have to be something that everybody duplicates it, but just to say, generally speaking, what are you looking for?
I appreciate that, David. That's it's very kind of you. Thank you. Rick, go ahead.
Thanks. So is the plan to prescribe the data elements in the rule, or the form and the format, the font, all that stuff, or was the idea to make an exhibit that has all the elements that you're looking for? I mean, either way, it has to be done by rule, right? But I think it might depend on how you draft it then.
Our original, or one of the ideas we had at the first meeting was an exhibit similar to how our standard plans are an exhibit of the standard plan rule. But we're having some trouble getting there. So I don't think we would get to the level of granularity of font and bold and italicized and things like that, just again because of the timeline we're in. I think it would be a little more high level this time around, listing the items we would want included in the document. So there would probably be a little variation here and there, but the idea would be that the actual content would be the same content for everyone. You know, everyone would have URL for their website, everyone would have company name, everyone would have percentage requested, et cetera, et cetera. At least this go around. To reiterate, this is not necessarily, you know, this is a rule that we can come back to when we have more time. But as you have all mentioned, and we all know that we're all up against it a little bit right now. So we're just trying to get the best document out we can. Antoinette.
Yeah, I'm aware of Idaho also having a consumer-friendly document to accompany their rate filings. You could also look at that as a starting point, which I've heard it is a little bit more simpler than Washington's. If you do have access to that, you can possibly look at it as a starting point for the template. I think I may be able to get a sample for you and I can send it to you. But again, this is just a starting point to just kind of keep the idea flowing in terms of the apples to apples for, you know, a consumer to compare apples to apples with, you know, every carrier. So it could be a starting point to look at just for Oregon.
Yeah, please do send that on. Thank you, if you are able to.
Okay.
Does anyone else have thoughts about the rule text versus template discussion? All right. Well, I'll open it up for public comment. So if there is anything, usually that's for members of the public who are on the call that don't necessarily aren't members of the RAC, but we can also just circle back because we do have a few minutes if there's any last comments that people have, thoughts, and then after that we'll talk about next steps. Oh, there's one item that Tasha wanted me to remind everyone. So this requirement, once it's put into rule, which will be effective January 1st, will apply to individual and small group, including the quarterly rate filings. So not the quarterly rate filings that you might do during 2025, but starting January 1st of 2026, all filings will need to include this document, including the quarterly rate filings. So just wanted to reiterate that. So yeah, I'll open the floor up. All right, looks like for now we've all had our say. So for next steps, this has been a really robust and thoughtful discussion. I appreciate everyone's time and energy. We would appreciate if you have any other comments to submit them in writing. Let's say by a week from today, close of business. If it takes a little longer, that's not the end of the world, but it's something to shoot for. So it's at September 11th. And yeah, like I said, at this point, because of, I feel like I'm harping on this, but because of our compressed timeline, if people do have comments, it would be very helpful if we have suggestions as well on how we can get this ball across the goal line and just kind of finish this out or get this done and make it a robust document that helps people, but also we're able to fulfill our statutory obligation. Because again, we can always revisit this in other years when we have more time. But yeah, once we get comments, DFR staff's going to go back and talk about what we've heard today, as well as any comments we receive, and be in touch with next steps. But we do have another meeting on the calendar on Thursday, September 25th at 10 a.m. We'll send out that invite. And otherwise, we'll just look forward to hearing back from everyone.
I think it's the 24th.
I might be. I have. Oh, yep. I have a different
Okay.
rate review. Actually, yeah, my
Oh.
mistake. Oh, that's Todd. That's our ongoing rate
Somebody
review.
else. Okay. Okay.
The rulemaking one is the 24th at 1:30 p.m. I'm so sorry, everyone. Too much going on.
Yeah, there is.
All right. Angela, if you could get them in by close of business next Thursday, the 11th, that would be great. If you need a couple more days, that's perfectly fine. It just, in this case, it's more of just to have something to aim for so that we get them in time to take a look at them before we have our next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. All right. Well, then with that, I thank everyone for their time and look forward to hearing from you and seeing you again soon.
Thank you.